Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me I have Dan.
Hey mate, how are you?
Not too bad. We didn't record an episode last week for various reasons, so we missed out on a couple of more demoralising results in the form of the Derby and Fulham losses, but we'll skip past those and sort of look at the green shoots of recovery, so to speak, in terms of our draw with Sunderland. And it was a game that started quite promisingly in the way that we were set up and the way we were attacking, and we were creating a lot of chances. But as the chances wore on and no goals materialised, you kind of get that sinking feeling as a City fan that, sure enough, a goal to the opposition's just around the corner, and it materialised for Sunderland in that first half, courtesy of James Vaughan, and we weren't able to get an equaliser until Myler came on and really changed the game. But what was your big takeaway from the game, and how did you see the result?
Look, I think the result is it's complicated because I think you got to be happy to at least take points away from the game, considering how it played out. We started well, but then lost control of that whole first half. And we regained a bit of control in the second half when Myler came on and started dominating that midfield. But going into the game, I was anticipating. I thought we'd get 3 points. I thought we'd do it not comfortably, but I thought we'd get 3 points. But I'm not disappointed to come back the way we did. Yet again, it's a comeback, but to get at least take a point out of the game. I think the biggest talking point for me seems to be that Myler's been having such a big impact when he's been coming off the bench, but he still doesn't seem to be in contention for that starting spot in midfield.
Well, I was going to ask you that because obviously when the lineups were announced and we saw that it was again Henriksen and Larson anchoring that midfield, and that was the pairing that started the game against Derby to not great effect. There was already sort of a bit of concern about the nature of the lineup and what it could lead to in terms of a result. Is it surprising to you that Irvine and Myler in particular, given the way he's played when he's come on, haven't been considered a bit more for starts?
It honestly does, because we've spoken about already this year that with the way that our squad has now been built, we have a lot of young players, but we've got a few key older players with lots of experience. And I don't know why. I think Myler, with his passion that he has and what he can bring to the team, like as we've made note of, he's not necessarily the most technically gifted player, but he's passionate and he'll go out and he's going to give you 100%. He sort of seems to be the player that we need on the pitch, and even off the pitch, he's willing. He's come out publicly and spoken a few truths that possibly have hit people in some sore spots, but I think that might be whatever he's doing seems to be working when he's getting the opportunity to play. So I think it surprised me that he isn't starting for one, and I don't know, both Henriksen and Larson I would consider as attacking-minded midfielders. I'd be putting them in, if I was lining them up, would be sitting in behind a striker, not as holding midfielders. And I think that's one of the biggest things that seems to be upsetting Henriksen in particular, without the level of experience that Larson has, is that I think he's being played out of position and he's struggling to adapt his game to that. But yeah.
I mean, it's a bit interesting because I've seen comments that Irvine as well as an attacking midfielder, and I'm not entirely sure I'd agree with those, because I think Irvine was fundamentally and first and foremost more of a holding midfielder. Especially, I know, watching him play for the Socceroos, that's generally more of his position. It's more of a deep lying midfielder. Much more rarely getting forward than he would be when he was playing, for instance, at Burton and potentially for us. So he seems to be one who'd be more suited to that position than, say, Henriksen, who, as you say, definitely seems to be much more of an attack-minded midfielder and doesn't seem to be either able to or willing to put his body on the line and really sort of graft his way to a good position and good result. And you see the difference as soon as Myler comes on, that he's willing to put his body on the line, and there's a bit more grit and determination in the team when that's the case. I guess it's a bit frustrating at the moment with Stewart out injured as well, because he's another one who'd be much more suited to that defensive midfielder position. Another position where it almost seems that we're kind of playing a player out of position is with Dicko as a lone striker, and there were a few comments during the week. I think Windass wrote an article in the paper about the fact that really he should be starting with two up top, and whether that's Campbell when he's fit or whether it's Diamande or someone like that. Dicko doesn't strike me as the sort of striker who can play that lone role.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I really dislike playing lone strikers. I understand that the way the game's developing and everything now, there's generally becoming a bit more of a push to have a man up top and then being able to get wide guys to the byline and in and around and all that sort of thing. But I'm not a fan of having a lone striker. I just feel that they're often too isolated to make an impact. And obviously that's what we're seeing with Dicko at the moment, is when he's getting the ball, he's either too far away or he's not sure exactly what to do with it because it's not really his go. I think for the most part he would have been paired with someone. And I think we saw earlier in the year with Campbell and Hernandez that Campbell has been working really well as part of a pairing. He was putting in a really good shift to support Hernandez as the main guy early in the season. And I would love to see if Campbell's deemed fit enough that those two could form a partnership up top.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, I think, with Campbell returning to closer to full fitness, whether he gets the chance to start alongside Dicko in the next couple of games. Will be good to see. I guess the only other thing I really wanted to touch on before we moved on, and it was a byproduct of that loss to Fulham, but Jared Bowen's start to the season's been outstanding, and I think if he's not still currently equal top goal scorer in the division, he's very close to it. Obviously not scoring against Sunderland, but 5 goals to his name already this season in 6 or 7 games is a pretty outstanding effort, and he wrapped up Young Player of the Month.
Yeah, I know I personally have had raps on him for a little while. I've always thought that if he just was given the opportunity and got an extended run in the side, that he'd show us exactly what he could do, and he has. And I think the most pleasing thing for me is that I think after the game against Villa to open the season, he came out and he said, "My goal for the season was to get 1." And he did that in the very first game. He said, "Okay, now I'm going to, reevaluate. Now I wanted to get to double figures." And after 8 games, he's halfway there. So he's on fire at the moment, and it's really good to see that we've got players around our squad that when they get a chance, they're willing to grab it with both hands and run.
Absolutely.
He's going to be a very important player for us for the rest of the season, assuming he can stay fit.
Yeah, I mean, that's knock on wood. The main thing, it seems, whenever a player gets on a decent run, they get a bit of an injury that kind of stalls their momentum. So hopefully he can stay fit and keep firing the goals in, because we certainly need them at the moment. And it's just good to have that bit of optimism and spark in the team as well. It kind of gives a bit of hope, even if we are to finish the season mid-table or a bit lower. It's a really bright sign for the future if we can hold on to him. I guess on the front of his contract status, I think he's into the last 12 months of his deal, and dare I say, it'd be worrying if we get into another situation as we did with Josh Tymon, where the deal just sort of runs down and the player ends up leaving the club without being able to agree terms to a longer-term deal. And I mean, just from my perspective, I don't understand. Just put a 5-year, 6-year contract in front of him, double his wages, because he's going to be on, I don't know, $2,000 a week, $3,000 a week, something incredibly minimal. Double his wages, you're still paying maybe $5,000 a week for someone who at the moment is looking a pretty outstanding striking prospect or even wing prospect. In worst case scenario, next summer, if a big club comes knocking, then at least we've got that security of a 5-year contract behind him that we can get a decent fee out of him. You don't want to be running the risk of him going for either free or a very minimal fee. So it would seem to make sense from all parties to get him tied down to a long-term deal.
Oh, absolutely. As a young player, there's no reason for any young player to not be being offered long contracts, because from a business standpoint, from a footballing standpoint, it just makes sense. You get security on both ends, on both sides of the table, and I think if Bowen, if they can sort out a nice long contract for him early in this season as well, that's going to be one less thing that might start weighing on his mind and start affecting his game later on.
Absolutely. Well, we'll move on then and talk about that coming game against Reading on the weekend. It'll be an interesting one because obviously the way that we started the season and the form that we're in, we aren't looking too good when we go away from home. I don't think we've won away from home since that lone success against Swansea at the start of last season. So it'll be a tough challenge on the road for us. Up against a Reading side featuring a pretty familiar face as captain in Paul McShane. So what are your thoughts heading into this one? And I guess following on from the theme a couple of weeks ago when we talked about famous meetings or fond memories of meetings between the two sides. Do you have any big memories of games against Reading?
No, I don't really have any big memories, really. But I think my biggest concern is that we'll get struck by that returning player's curse again, and McShane will bloody score a header off a corner or something stupid.
Do you think he'd celebrate? Do you reckon it's been long enough? Is it one of those things where it's been long enough that he'd celebrate, or he still has enough love for the club that he might just sort of hold the celebrations back?
I don't know, but personally I think it's been long enough that if he did celebrate, I wouldn't be upset by it. Yeah. But in terms of the game in general, I think it's every game in the championship is going to be a tough game. Doesn't matter whether you're playing first or last. It's going to be a tough game. And I think if we can start, I feel like we repeat ourselves almost every time we come on here, but if we can start the way that we started the second half, then, we can sustain that for 90 minutes, then we can cause some problems for Reading. And I think that we can take points from this game. We just need to be focused.
Well, we've won the last 4 games against Reading, which is a pretty decent record. And just to remind you of the last time we played them, I think it was the game where Robertson scored the winner quite late on after Hernandez had put us level. I think Reading scored pretty early in the game. So it was a game that kind of secured our place in the top 6 at the time. It was near the end of the season and kept us within touching distance of the top 2, even though it was by then almost mathematically out of our grasp. So it kind of bodes well that we've got that record against them, but of course the team is very different from the team that lined up in those games. And of course the interesting stat against Derby the other week was the fact that Derby had more Hull City first team appearances in their starting 11 than we did, and their starting 11 only had Curtis Davies and Tom Addison in it. So I don't actually think they had all too many Hull City caps between them, but it just kind of speaks volumes of the players that we have in our 11 at the moment. That
stat seems to be popping up a fair bit recently because the same stat appeared in Sunderland and Everton's Carabao Cup tie.
my friend, my Everton supporting friend was mentioning that stat to me this morning, and I was sort of I made that exact point that it was the same as our stat. I guess even more remarkable for the Everton game because they would have had they obviously haven't had the same level of turnover as we have. But in terms of players that have played quite a few games for us, Michael Dawson lining up for his 100th cap as a Hull City player. I sort of alluded to in a discussion with you this afternoon the fact that I still have memories of his debut for us against Aston Villa, and as far as debuts go, it's probably one he's banished from his memory because of just how dreadful it was. It seemed as if every touch he had led to either a goal or a big chance for Villa that day. But he's certainly come on since then, and he's been a very solid contributor to us, if nothing else.
Dawson has been, for the most part, I think he's been good. I've enjoyed him being such an influential member of the squad for the last couple of years. I think what's he, 33, 34? Is he that old?
Something like that. Yeah, he's getting...
Yeah, he's getting on a little bit, and I think it is...
Yeah, 33.
it's sort of starting to show a little bit. I think but he's still got enough experience that if he's same with everyone, if he's got enough experience that when he's on form and he's on song, that he's able to counter that, the lack of mobility that he has and those things. He's got, if he on his day, he's got a great read of the game. He's got a great cover tackle. He just and he's good. He's a good communicator, and I think he brings a lot. He brings a lot, and he has brought a lot to our side. So
yeah, he's definitely been a very capable servant, and it's always great to see the Dawson name still living on in the team, especially after Andy retired a couple of years back. So it's kind of I'm actually almost surprised in a way that he's stuck with us as long as he has, because when we signed him, obviously coming from Tottenham, it was a bit of a gamble from his point of view, coming to a club that would be battling relegation, and despite relegation from the Premier League not once but twice, he's really stuck with us, and whether that's by choice or not, who's to say, but he's been a great servant for the club and really sort of put his all on the line for us on a number of occasions, and hopefully can do again against Reading. So what's your tip for the game against Reading on the weekend?
I actually think it will have another 1-1.
Yeah, I'll take a 1-1 at this stage. I think sitting down in 17th, where we are at the moment, we just need to start accumulating a few points and pulling a bit further towards the middle of the table. And I can respect why Slutsky named the team that he did last weekend, in terms of trying to keep a bit of continuity and really settle the team down now that the team's starting to gel and get its dynamic, and you don't want to keep chopping and changing it constantly. So if we name a similar team with perhaps Myler and potentially Irvine in for Henriksen and Larson, if we kept the rest of the team similar, maybe Campbell starting as well for who was the centre forward? Who was the attacking midfielder? Was it wasn't Terrell? He didn't start.
No, Terrell didn't start.
Well, if we
because we changed formation as well at half time, I believe. So.
Yeah. Well, if we can start Campbell and Dicko up top together and have Irvine and Myler as the holding midfielders, I think it would go a long way to giving us a bit more shape and a bit more solidarity against Reading. And yeah, I could potentially see us coming away with a point in that one, hopefully. And then we've got another game midweek against Preston. So Preston have actually had a pretty decent start to the season. I think they managed to knock off Cardiff, which was a pretty incredible result, given the fact that Cardiff are absolutely flying at the moment. So even though it's a home game, it's obviously not one to take too lightly. I guess at this point, the main concern is not to be starting players midweek and on the weekend if they don't have the legs to do so. And it's why I found it a bit surprising when Larson has been playing as much as he has, given his age and presumably his fitness levels. But do you envisage much rotation for a midweek game, or do you sort of see if we can name a relatively stable team that's more important at this stage?
Look, I think honestly, there'll be some changes. There'll be a little bit of rotation, I think, in that engine room, in that middle of the park area. But honestly, Irvine has got to start one of these two games. I think Myler might start one and Irvine the other. Would be maybe the best way to do it, to get them both to start and see how they go in that position. Because I just, as much as I don't think he should, I don't see Slutsky. I don't think he's going to change both of those centre midfielders in the same time. He'll leave either Henriksen or Larson in there. But yeah, I think. Although the other thing, depending, depends on the formation. If we go three, are we going to go three at the back? We're going to go four at the back. My other concern, which I just remembered about at the moment, based on recent performances, is Hector, who started the season on fire, but has had in my opinion, a bit of a fall from grace, fall out of form a little bit.
Would you prefer we switch to a back four again? Because obviously we had the back three against Sunderland with Tamori, Dawson and Hector. And I guess actually looking at the lineup, it would have been Bowen who was playing in the hole behind Dicko, or potentially Grzycki, depending on how they were sort of rotating through.
Mm-hmm.
do you see potentially Hector dropping out of the team and just going to a back four? Because Tamori has looked quite settled when he's been playing in the last couple of games.
Yeah, I think we will probably go. We should go back to a back four. I think because just like obviously we've bought players and like obviously we've bought all the centre backs, but we've also bought. We bought Kingsley. Like we went out of our way to make sure that he was included in a deal. Like I think we'll go. Well, we know Slutsky wants his 4-2-3-1. That's his preferred formation. I think he might try to run that out again on the weekend.
Well, it's going to be interesting. What's your prediction for the game against Preston?
Oh, that's right. See, at home, I think it really depends on how we go against Reading. If we can get a positive result against Reading, or at least put in a positive performance, then I think we'll go well. At home, it's. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to go 2-1 because I don't think we're going to keep a clean sheet at the moment. But I don't know. I'm not sure where the goals are going to come from, but I feel like we could get a win if we have a positive result against Reading. If we don't play well against Reading, then I have no faith in our ability against Preston.
And then I guess, looking at the more unfortunate side of things, if we are to lose to Reading and then fail to get a decent result against Preston, we sort of lose all sort of pace with the top half of the table. And I mean, you don't want to be too pessimistic at this stage of the season, but the R word sort of starts to loom above the head of the team if we keep kind of going on a winless run. And of course, you just have to look at Sunderland sitting just 2 points outside the relegation zone themselves to see that it's not really. You can't really look at the Championship as a division where it's split between 8 to 10 teams who have a decent budget, a decent core, who absolutely can't get relegated, and 6 to 8 teams that. Essentially League One teams with a slightly inflated budget who could finish anywhere in the table realistically, but are at potentially a chance of going down with just a couple of injuries, and then 5 to 10 teams in between just sort of floating around. We could end up kind of seeing ourselves drift into that bottom pack, but if we're not too careful and if results keep going against us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I made reference to it before that anyone can beat anyone in the Championship, and so you've always got to be really careful, and particularly careful, especially at the moment. We are on a bit of a downward slide, and you got to be careful and try not to let that continue for too much longer, because, as you say, we could end up in a very, very dangerous position.
Well, hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully we can get a couple of wins to really sort of bounce back and get our season running. Because, of course, if we are able to get back-to-back wins against Reading and Preston, on the other hand, it really shoots us up the table and would really get us within touching distance of the top 6, which would be great to see. And you do get that feeling. I mean, I think Milo commented on it as well after the Sunderland game, that there are quality players in the squad now, and it's just about gelling and really sort of getting a bit of momentum together and get some feeling into the squad that we really can achieve something this season. And to be honest, going into the season, I would have accepted a top half finish as a successful season. I don't think, if we were being realistic, I don't think promotion, especially not top 2, was really on the cards. Who knows? I mean, a lot can change in the season, just over a couple of weeks with a bit of a run of form. But if we can get a run of games together, if we can finish in the top half, challenge towards that top 6, I think I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I think I've got a fairly similar opinion to you on like my expectation, like my honest expectations after our relegation last season was that we were going to lose some players and we would probably struggle to adapt quickly, and I thought we would bounce back okay. I didn't think I didn't foresee automatic promotion really either, but I thought that if we could replace the players that left and get good business done in the transfer window, that we would be able to push towards that top 6. It just sort of at the moment, as you alluded to, depends on whether we can this players that have been brought in, because it's been an overhaul of the playing roster. If we can get them to gel, and obviously the sooner the better.
Absolutely, and hopefully it starts this weekend with a big win against Reading. So thank you for coming on, Dan.
No worries.
And thank you everyone for listening in. Hopefully we can get those 3 points against Reading and follow it up with another 3 points against Preston. And hopefully we're back here this time next week talking about those back-to-back wins, really propelling our season and getting it started. So thank you everyone for listening in, and come on, City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're Amber